Hello, New Paltz. Welcome to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'm here every Wednesday at 9 a.m. talking movies, new reviews, recommendations, lists. I just love movies, and that's what I do here. We're back for the first show of the spring semester, and on today's show, I'm going to do mini reviews for 7 new releases I saw during break, review Sam Raimi's new horror movie, Send Help, give you my ranking of the Evil Dead franchise, and close out the show with my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. I'll be right back, but first here's some movie music, starting with In the Meantime by Space Hog from the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 soundtrack. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Kicking off the show today, I have 7 movies that came out during break that I saw that I wanted to talk about here. Just gonna go through them in release order, give a little review of each of them. Some of these I saw during break and I was like, I want to talk about these on the show when I get back. So we're doing it now. Hope everyone had a great break. Let's get right into this. One of the first new releases I saw during break was Avatar: Fire and Ash.
Your goddess has no dominion here.
Directed by James Cameron, this is the 3rd entry in the Avatar franchise. Jake and Neytiri's family grapples with grief, encountering a new, aggressive Na'vi tribe, the Ash People, who are led by the fiery Varang, as the conflict on Pandora escalates and a new moral focus emerges. James Cameron has taken us to the world of Pandora, and I do really enjoy seeing these movies in theaters. I was too young to see the original film in theaters, I was like 3 years old, and I never watched it growing up. I only watched it for the first time in 2022 in anticipation for Avatar: The Way of Water coming out. I liked the first one watching it at home, but it really didn't pull me into the story and characters too much. It's decent, but I heard you gotta see these in theaters, that's why they make billions. And I saw Way of Water in theaters and understood, an awesome theater movie. The visuals and the water effects were outstanding, the detail of this world is insane. So I was excited for this 3rd one for the theater experience alone, to see more Avatar and James Cameron in theaters, and it gives you that from it, but these stories and characters are really starting to get old for me. Way of Water certainly repeats a lot of that original film story. Quaritch is the villain again. It's more about the colonizing of Pandora. The RDA is continuing their goals, but you had the family dynamic introduced, the technology improved, so the action and visuals are even more exciting, especially with the underwater sequences, so there was more to offer even if the main plot is similar. But now, for a 3rd movie, the plot isn't different enough. The RDA has their plans. They want Jake Sully. We've seen this before. Things progress a little bit with the family characters and the kids after some events of the last movie. There's some strong emotional moments there. The Sullys as a family have made them slightly more engaging of characters, but it's reached a point that doing this very same plot in these movies having very similar stories, I was just kind of indifferent towards this one. Yes, the theater experience is great, the visuals and sequences they pulled off again are incredible. They're some of the greatest special effects ever done in movies. It's mind-blowing how good these movies look. But on the world building and story side, it's not been enough. Even the Fire People as the new element of this movie are really underdeveloped. They had some interesting elements that I don't think were explored enough. They ended up feeling really unengaging. I want to continue to be excited about going to the theater for these movies. I just can't get into these stories that much, and the more it feels familiar, the less interested I feel. I can't give this movie a negative score. The visuals are masterful. This movie is definitely worth going to see in a theater. There's some really strong scenes, but it's way too similar to the story of the first 2 movies, and the new elements it introduces weren't engaging enough for me, unfortunately. The next new release I saw during break was Marty Supreme.
And it's only a matter of time before I'm staring at you from the cover of a Wheaties box. You think it's that simple?
Yeah, I do.
Directed by Josh Safdie, Marty Mauser, a young man with a dream no one respects, goes to hell and back in pursuit of greatness. The Safdie brothers both had new movies coming out this year they directed separately. Benny Safdie directed The Smashing Machine with Dwayne Johnson that released a few months ago. This is the movie Josh directed that came out on Christmas. It stars Timothée Chalamet, who I have been very interested in lately. Dune, A Complete Unknown. I enjoyed him as Willy Wonka as well. This movie is about his character, Marty, chasing a dream of becoming a table tennis great, but it is so much more than that. It is far more stressful and exhilarating than you would expect a table tennis movie to be. If you have seen Good Time and Uncut Gems that the Safdie brothers directed together, you know how good these guys are at putting you with these characters that you follow, getting into crazy amounts of trouble. Josh does that so successfully here with the character of Marty. He's a guy with a dream, he has something he's pursuing, something he wants to be great at. It makes him interesting to follow, he draws you in right away. But you also get to see the negative qualities about him, about his attitude towards his goal. This guy is locked in so much on his goal that he will use anyone and do about anything to get there. Where this quality of Marty takes him, how crazy the story gets, how thrilling this is for being superficially about table tennis. It's an escalation of conflict that seems so outrageous, but the problems build so well. You see Marty get more into trouble, you just can't wait to see what he's going to do next, and what it leads to is so unpredictable. And Timothée Chalamet nails all of this with his performance. He brings the energy and eagerness of Marty that draws you in. He has goals, he has passion, but he also brings the arrogance, the entitlement, the nastiness of this character that makes him very frustrating. This balance makes Marty such a complex character. He's so captivating. Chalamet is tremendous at depicting all that goes into Marty Mauser. There's so many great sequences. It sets up these problems for Marty, how his goal and his dangerous level of dedication to it is putting him in situations that put himself and others at risk. The rest of the supporting cast is also great. Gwyneth Paltrow, Odessa A'zion, Kevin O'Leary, and Tyler the Creator give strong performances as well. These characters around Marty and the relationships there work so well in the story to play off Marty's qualities. Some people he genuinely cares for, but there are also people he's totally fine using if he can get closer to his goal. Every performance and the scenes with him are so gripping. The table tennis scenes in this movie are also really exciting. Table tennis is really exciting, the speed and precision of everything, and the sequences are brought to life with so much energy. The sports aspect of the back and forth is thrilling, but these ping pong sequences also hold so much character building and human conflict. The ending of this movie is also tremendous. It has the complexity of the character. There's different ways you can interpret it and discuss it, what you think it meant exactly, but it wraps things up so well. This movie is such a ride. It's thrilling, the characters are so complex and lock you into this stressful experience. The cast is incredible. I was blown away watching this. The next movie I want to talk about is The Housemaid.
So why do you want this job?
I just really enjoy being a housemaid. For the right families, of course.
You know this is a live-in position, right?
Directed by Paul Feig, a struggling young woman is relieved by the chance for a fresh start as a maid for a wealthy couple. Soon she discovers that the family's secrets are far more dangerous than her own. This is a fairly simple horror movie setup. Someone going to this house where things seem pretty normal at first and get crazier and crazier, and it sticks to that pretty closely, but it also keeps you guessing and has some brutal moments and really well done twists. This movie stars Sydney Sweeney as the outsider character who comes into this family as their housemaid, the wife being played by Amanda Seyfried, and the husband being played by Brandon Sklenner. You go into this setting, the movie sets up details. As the situation gets stranger and more intense, you start to make assumptions about what's going on that come into play really smartly later on when the twists come. I think the whole cast is good here. Everyone has different layers to their characters, elements to what they're doing depending on what their goals are. Sydney Sweeney brings the normalcy and caution to the character that is trying to keep her head down, but when the horror stuff gets going, she plays the fear and intensity really well also. Amanda Seyfried and Brandon Sklenner are both fascinating and unpredictable here, and every character feels impossible to fully understand until the reveals happen at really effective times. There's really strong horror moments and intense moments that have a really strong use of blood and gore that makes you feel sick, but it feels raw and not too over the top. It also ties into deeper themes with the horror that I actually don't want to say because it would kind of spoil things. If you like these kind of horror thrillers with a simple setup and using details to have really engaging twists, I think you will like this. The book it's based on is also really popular too, it seems, and this movie has made tons of money. It's looking to be very profitable. My only real issue is just that it drags a little bit in the middle, and some scenes feel a little drawn out, but I enjoyed this movie. It's a nice horror surprise. The next movie I want to talk about is The Rip.
You should just take whatever money you want and walk away before this goes really bad for all of us.
No one needs to die tonight. You have 30 minutes to get out of that house.
Directed by Joe Carnahan, a group of Miami cops discovers a stash of millions in cash, leading to distrust as outsiders learn about the huge seizure, making them question who to rely on. This was in my most anticipated movies of 2026 list. It's a cop thriller starring Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. These two starring in a movie together already has me in. This concept and trailer looked really solid. Joe Carnahan has a number of movies I still need to watch, but one I really enjoy I like to recommend is Boss Level. It's a really cool time loop movie with Frank Grillo. And The Rip is a really cool cop thriller from Carnahan that delivered for me. You start off with this mystery and being introduced to these characters and this police agency that has a lot of distrust and conflict within. Then you get to the main part of the movie at this house where a bunch of drug money is found, and the movie very effectively makes you feel very shaky about everything going on. It has details in place that make the characters start to doubt each other, who knew what, who lied about what, and with the setup of this police department already being in so much shambles, you really feel like anyone already introduced or that comes along the way could be dirty, could be working away for themselves to get a big payday, that they might not care about the law as much as they do their own wallets. The whole series of events of uncovering this money, trying to get to the bottom of this, to seize this money and get out safely, it puts you in the room with these characters and allows you to feel the tension in the air. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are so engaging as leads here. The whole cast is really solid. None of these characters are super interesting or developed. There's not a whole lot about them that makes too much of an impression, but having leads that can bring this intensity and a bit of personality to their performances is always great to see in thrillers like this. Damon and Affleck make their characters likable in the scenes where they're more just hanging out, but when the action goes down, you believe how tense and angry things get. As for the action, there's some decent shootouts and chases, but not really any that really stand out. More of the appeal is the mystery and the paranoia aspect that is built so well in the dialogue in this small setting. The twists aren't the most clever, but I did like how the reveals were given, and the smartness in getting there was really satisfying. Another issue I would have is some forced attempts at emotion at the end that didn't feel built up enough. There's some details with the characters that ties well into the plot at times, but as for having that emotional impact it was going for at the end, it was pretty unnatural. But overall, this is a really good cop thriller that gives you the tense experience it promises. The next movie I want to talk about is Primate.
Ben? There's something wrong with Ben.
Directed by Johannes Roberts, a group of friends' tropical vacation turns into a terrifying, primal tale of horror and survival. Basically, this is a killer slasher movie where the killer is a chimp. I saw the trailer for this and thought it looked like it would be pretty dumb. The trailers looked really generic, even with the chimp aspect, but I thought I'll probably see that. Maybe it'll be better than it looks. I saw it, and like I said with The Housemaid, this movie sticks closely to the tropes of the slasher genre, but The Housemaid was quite smartly written and tackled deeper themes, and it was a strong entry in its genre. I can't say the same for Primate, unfortunately. It has a couple of really cool kills that are super messed up and have fun with the concept, but many of the thrills and horror is so predictable and lame. It's people sneaking around, coming into situations like hiding in a closet, clueless characters being in a room with the killer, someone in a car trying to lock the killer out, and even when the kills themselves are clever, the build-up and how these scenes play out is as basic as can be. The movie doesn't do enough with the chimp aspect that really differentiates itself. The experience isn't any more fun or unique because of who the killer is. The human characters can be pretty annoying and do some really dumb stuff, and the movie spends so much time on the drama with them that just does not matter. I will say the final showdown gets pretty fun, and the setting of this tropical house compound is visually pretty cool at points, and uses the setting in clever ways at different times. I suppose this is what the trailers promised. It's very basic and predictable. The characters are pretty tiresome, but there's a few fun moments that get crazy, but mostly I just didn't enjoy it. The next movie I want to talk about is 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple.
And now, a leap into the unknown.
The next movie in the 28 Days Later franchise and the second film in the ongoing 28 Years Later trilogy, directed by Nia DaCosta. As Spike is inducted into Jimmy Crystal's gang on the mainland, Dr. Kelson makes a discovery that could alter the world. I got caught up on this franchise recently, and I did not care for 28 Years Later too much. The story for the first half didn't draw me in too much, and the zombie sequences had some elements I didn't care for. Some of the effects with the blood and the kills I found very distracting. The emotions get strong in the end, but still I was missing the experience I want from these movies. This movie picks up the story from the last movie and presents two stories that I got very invested in both of. You have Spike from the last movie, played by Alfie Williams, who is really great in both these movies, as he's taken in by this satanic cult led by Jimmy, played by Jack O'Connell. With Sinners last year and now this guy is giving some really strong horror performances lately. He is terrifying here. Nia DaCosta brings you back into this world so successfully with Alex Garland's script that it's probably the darkest this world has been yet. It pulls zero punches when it comes to what the Jimmy cult is doing. There's some horrific sequences, and you fear for Spike in these situations. He is definitely less prominent here, even in scenes he's in, and I would have liked for him to do more earlier on so he didn't fall into the background as much. This Jimmy cult plot, though, adds so much danger to this story, and it shows what awfulness you could have the displeasure of running into in this world, what threats an apocalyptic world creates. I would have still liked a few more straight-up infected sequences to give that classic chaos of the first two movies a little more, but this world feels so dangerous, so bleak. But balancing that out is the other main plot of this movie, what is going on with Dr. Kelson, played by Ralph Fiennes, perhaps my favorite character of this whole franchise. Once the previous movie introduced him, I loved him immediately. He's such a kind man in this bleak world that has so much wisdom, but also has such a wonderful sense of humor. Fiennes is tremendous here. His character having more of a role the entire movie this time was great. His plot and his character, along with Spike, gives hope to this world that there are good people out there trying to do the right thing, and maybe there's hope for this world. What he's up to in this movie is interesting for the world building and plot of this world overall, and it's surprisingly sweet and heartwarming that is so fitting for this character. The way the script builds to a finale, it's unpredictable, intense, and closes things out really well, but it also opens the door really well for the third movie without shortchanging its own story. I am so excited for the future of this series now, so much more than I was before this movie. I think Nia DaCosta nailed this. It's probably my favorite movie in the whole franchise now. The last movie I want to talk about is Mercy.
You're before this court today charged with the murder of your wife.
Oh my God.
Your guilt must fall below the 92% threshold, or you will be executed in precisely 90 minutes.
Directed by Timur Bekmambetov, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, set in the near future, a detective accused of murdering his wife has 90 minutes to prove his innocence to an advanced AI judge. When I read that summary and saw the trailer, I thought this could be terrible, or it could be kind of fun. I thought it was fun. You got Chris Pratt as a cop character trying to prove his innocence with an artificial intelligence, full resources at his disposal, and I think a lot of it worked really well. There's some engaging sequences of him following leads, using clues and deductive reasoning to follow names, dates, looking at footage, and communicating with people. The kind of screen layout the movie uses I think worked well to put the audience with him, and following his character's process and lines of thinking was clear and made it exciting. When he starts making progress and maybe closing in on something, I got into it, you feel it building, and you also feel the frustration when he hits dead ends. It does a mostly good job with this murder mystery all throughout Los Angeles, pretty much, with Chris Pratt in its chair the whole time. The times where it got pretty weird was when it showed some action, like a chase or a hand-to-hand fight with another character that Chris Pratt is watching through the cameras. It got distracting, and the visualization of this made me unable to get fully engaged. It's pretty choppy and hard to follow at points. The AI concept was decent for a while. I liked Rebecca Ferguson as the judge, but the third act gets way too crazy with everything. How the technology works and the AI themes gets so convoluted and tries to do crazier things without having the writing to back it up. It's forced, the character's behavior is very awkward, it's very messy. There's also points earlier in the movie where exposition is delivered during the trial that is so forced. I ended up being annoyed that this guy was wasting so much time and how unnatural the delivery was. There's plenty of points too with very blunt and cheesy dialogue with some rough line delivery. I sound pretty negative on this, but I overall was pretty invested in it and enjoyed it. The concept and execution aren't perfect. The third act is very nonsensical and convoluted, but it presents an engaging investigation that takes advantage of some of the opportunities of its concept. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Marty's Dream by Daniel Lopatin from the Marty Supreme score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, we had a new Sam Raimi movie come out last weekend, Send Help. An employee, played by Rachel McAdams, and her insufferable boss, played by Dylan O'Brien, become stranded on a deserted island, the only survivors of a plane crash. Here, they must overcome past grievances and work together to survive. Will they make it out alive? The only Sam Raimi movie I've seen going into this is his Spider-Man trilogy and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, so I'm up to date on his comic book movies. I love his Spider-Man trilogy, but I knew he was more of a horror director, and his most iconic horror films are his trilogy of Evil Dead movies that I watched recently. I'm going to rank those in a bit. I saw this movie was coming out and wanted to watch some of his other horror films, so I started there, and after watching them, I got very excited to see what he cooked up in Send Help. The Evil Dead movies have so much personality and are scary and extremely fun, and the filmmaking on them is masterful with his camera work and atmosphere, and Send Help is a thrilling, dark horror movie that balances a twisted sense of humor, and Rachel McAdams, Dylan O'Brien, and Raimi's direction pull this off to be one of the most entertaining and captivating horror movies I've seen recently. The first thing I have to talk about with this movie is the two lead performances. These two characters are established so well in the first act of this movie. You see the current state of their lives, what their positions are at this company, and how they are being treated, what the dynamics are like before the plane crash. You have Rachel McAdams as Linda, who you get invested in very quickly. She's very awkward, but also very friendly and driven, but she is disliked and dismissed by everyone at her company, and you get invested in this struggle she's in and wanting to be appreciated and respected, and it's a great way to develop the character, to make you invested in her, but also set things up about her normal life that ties into when things get crazy on the island. This is how things are now, what if the situation changed, and overall the setup of her character early on is very smart and lays the foundation really well. Rachel McAdams is brilliant here. I enjoyed her performance so much in this movie. The script gives Linda so much to show, her passion, her awkwardness, her smarts, but also when things get twisted and Sam Raimi does his thing, McAdams kills these darker moments, and the whole complexity of all this being in one character, in one movie, is tremendously handled. The character doesn't feel inconsistent. She's a very complex person that finds herself in this extreme scenario, and all she is and what she's been through makes the character so captivating, and McAdams is equally lovable, funny, and terrifying. Speaking of the humor, this movie is also really funny at times, and McAdams contributes so much to that. Her quirky personality and her gleeful sarcasm at different points is so well done and adds so much enjoyment to this. The humor comes from the character's personality, so it fits in so well, and with the brutality and nastiness, the dark humor makes things even more unnerving. It's a perfect mix, and of course Raimi gets credit for that. He's done dark comedy and his horror so well before, but what McAdams pulls off with her performance is truly unbelievable. The other lead character is Dylan O'Brien as Bradley, Linda's boss. This character is introduced as Linda's new boss and is very hateable very quickly. You see how he treats Linda, putting on that very phony corporate friendliness and undervaluing her work, and also being very nasty at times. Dylan O'Brien plays him so well. He brings the arrogance and selfishness so well. Every scene with him early on where he's with his executive buddies is so nasty. You really see the power dynamic with these two characters so effectively early on. From the first scene, Dylan O'Brien just makes things so nasty, but he's so good at it with his performance. He has that perfect balance of personality that makes him entertaining, but disgusting at the same time. When you get to the island, like with McAdams, O'Brien brings so much complexity to his performance. He's trying to hold some control in this situation, and the way his ego comes into play is so fascinating to watch, and O'Brien plays these crazy scenes so well, so much unsettling emotions displayed. These two performances together create some terrifying and captivating scenes. There's some scenes in this movie that are so dark and twisted, but the build up to them and what it does to develop the characters and the dynamics is brilliant, and these actors directed by Raimi make this movie so exhilarating and well balanced. This movie has suspense from so many different sources. Of course, you have the classic scenario of being stuck on a deserted island. You have that sense of isolation, and this island presents some danger to the characters for sure, but the pairing of the two of them alone together on this island is what really makes this movie's conflict so interesting. It's such a great twist on the survival island genre that flips the dynamics of the typical world. Her boss had all the power on her, and now they're in a situation where she's gained so much power. What does that lead to? The theme of power and how it works in these relationships is explored so compellingly here. You put it on this island where that isolation is affecting our characters as well, and things get nuts. And how does the state of the relationship before getting to the island change things now? You get these super psychological scenes dealing with things like dependency, and you're seeing these characters not only go through some of the struggles of survival, but this kind of mind battle and how they use the circumstances against each other. It's really fascinating, and it provides thrills in a very clever way that gets down to the characters and their traits, and there's some really shocking stuff that makes this movie so unpredictable and nerve-wracking. The psychological stuff is excellent, but Sam Raimi as a horror director is also very graphic and bloody and brutal, and you most certainly get that kind of horror as well here. There's some sequences that are so brutal and show some images that start off as really messed up and gross, and the way they continue to play out features more and more shocking and gory stuff that freak you out and make you sick, but are also very entertaining. Some of the sequences lean more to the comedic side than others, and there's some scenes that get more dark and have a more raw, animalistic nature to them. Depending on the context of the scene and the build-up, the amount of humor and silliness certainly shifts, but it always feels appropriate for what emotions the scene is going for, the state of the characters, but no matter what, the graphicness and goriness makes the movie so unpredictable and terrifying as well, and the movie has the brilliant writing and performances to back it up, so it's not just grossness for the sake of it. There's always a purpose to it that keeps you on edge and makes it exciting. Compared to something like Raimi's Evil Dead trilogy, where the gore has more of a comedic side to it, this movie has more of that survivalist side to it that makes it more raw and brutal, but there's definitely still moments of humor in it. The balance is just perfect. I also want to mention Danny Elfman's score, which contributes really well to the intensity of each scene. It has an eeriness and pulsing nature that is really intense. It captures the suspense and at times mysterious vibe of each scene so well. This movie keeps you nervous, and the score goes a long way to giving that feeling. I only have a couple issues with this movie. It has a bit of a stretch where a few scenes feel a little long, and there's a few shots on the island that have a more green screeny, artificial look to them that was a little distracting in those scenes. But overall, Send Help is a really good time at the movies if you're in the mood for a good horror movie. It's got a great setup that Raimi does so much with, exploring the psychology of the characters and their relationship, tackling the idea of power and what it can do to people and relationships. The characters are so complex and captivating. The performances by Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien capture this so wonderfully and make each scene so entertaining and unpredictable. And when you want the Sam Raimi gore and dark humor, you get that too. The more I think about and talk about this movie, the more I love it. I give it a 90 out of 100. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Alone by Danny Elfman from the Spider-Man score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Next up today, I wanted to watch some of Sam Raimi's past horror movies, so I watched the Evil Dead franchise. He directed a trilogy of these movies in the 80s and 90s, starring Bruce Campbell as Ash Williams, and then there's been 2 more movies in the franchise since then. Let's get into this ranking. At number 5, I have Evil Dead from 2013. This is kind of a remake or reboot of the original film, directed by Fede Alvarez. This movie definitely got better for me as it progressed, and the finale is really well done and intense, but for the most part I didn't care for this movie and thought it was pretty dull. Fede Alvarez brings more of a darker and gritty direction to this story. Sam Raimi's original film doesn't get as wacky as the second and third films in his trilogy, but it approached its gore and horror in a bit of a lighter way that got pretty silly. This movie gets darker and more serious right away. The characters have kind of a troubled past and issues they're dealing with, and then when it gets to the horror, the violence is more conventionally graphic compared to Raimi's more absurd blood and gore. There's brutal stabs and people getting cut and impaled in very clear detail. I think this does make for some tense scenes, and the gore effects look pretty nasty and painful, but when it comes to the overall experience of this movie, it just didn't make an impression on me, and I found it to be kind of a drag. Fede Alvarez did his own thing with this concept, but I loved the wackiness of Raimi's movies, and I think losing that in this movie makes for a very bland and uninteresting experience. The concept of the Deadites and awakening the dead isn't a very interesting concept. They're like demon zombies, so it's a fun idea, but really what makes the original trilogy special is Sam Raimi's style, his dark comedy, the fun wackiness he injects into it. You also have Bruce Campbell as Ash in those movies. Even in the first movie, when he's not as wacky, he still has a fun personality and energy that Bruce Campbell brings to him, and all the characters in this one are very dull. The performances and dialogue are pretty rough at times. When it comes to the design of the Deadites, they also have no personality to them. They just look like average movie demons. They don't have the color and personality of Raimi's film, along with the design that made them really memorable in that first film. I don't want to compare it this much to the original, because it does its own thing, but I think when the fun of the franchise is taken away, and the characters are much less interesting, I couldn't really get into it or enjoy it very much. At number 4, I have Evil Dead Rise. This is the movie in the franchise that came out about 2 years ago, directed by Lee Cronin. This is another standalone story in the franchise that does something a little different with the concept of the Evil Dead. Instead of taking place in a cabin in the woods, it takes place in an apartment building. It follows new characters that accidentally release the Evil Dead and become trapped. This movie is kind of in the same boat as the Fede Alvarez movie for me. I enjoyed this one a little more, but overall it's pretty dull. The horror and thrills are pretty predictable and generic, and it feels like more of the same concept without the personality Raimi brought. It gets a little more into this sillier realm at certain points than the 2013 movie, and I think the finale is cool and has some fun moments with the gore, but overall it's again that it's the same horror concept of releasing the Evil Dead with the book, and it starts taking over the group of characters, but this movie didn't do enough different with it for me. Sure, it takes place in an apartment building instead of the woods, so it's a slightly different environment the characters are hunted in, but it made for a less scary setting in my opinion. When you have the cabin in the woods, there's your cabin, and then you're surrounded by dark woods where the evil is literally surrounding you. Here they're trapped in their apartment building, and it's just Los Angeles outside, so it didn't work much for me. It's less visually interesting than The Woods, and it feels more limited without being as scary. I get they didn't want to do the cabin in the woods again, but I don't think this setting worked. The setup of how the characters get the Book of the Dead is pretty dumb here, and the characters have a little more depth to them, but still not that interesting and don't make an impression. This movie, besides the finale, again didn't bring me in too much. The horror doesn't stick in my mind, this concept is repeated without much personality, and the setting didn't work for me. I didn't care for this one either, unfortunately. At number 3, I have Army of Darkness. Now we get into the Sam Raimi trilogy. This is the third movie that closes out Ash Williams' journey in a crazy but pretty awesome way. It's crazy that these movies got to this point. It started off with a haunted cabin in the woods, and now we're in medieval times fighting the dead with swords and bows and catapults. It's crazy how it gets here, but it's such a fun ride that you go with it, and the final battle is so exciting. I have this as my least favorite of Raimi's movies because I had a few bits with the comedy early on that got more annoying for me. It does some stuff with these creatures that I found more cringe than entertaining, and the plot with this quest Ash goes on is also very minimal, and his character arc of deciding to fight is very rushed, but this also has some of the franchise's best moments. There's certainly the bits I didn't care for here, but there's also some of Bruce Campbell's funniest moments as Ash Williams. How annoyed he is, how much he's so fed up with this whole situation. There's some line deliveries from him here that are so enjoyable and funny. This character and performance are just a treat to watch in these movies. When you get into the battle and the preparation and Ash training the army to fight the dead away, it's a tremendously fun and exciting mix of the silliness of the franchise with this genuinely epic and grand medieval battle. The catapult blasts and the flaming arrows, the sword fighting choreography with Ash. You wouldn't expect a big battle like this from the first two movies, but it's so good at it and balances everything so well that it earns it. This movie has some moments I didn't care for, and the plot is pretty weak, but when you get some of the best of Bruce Campbell's wackiness and that epic battle, I enjoyed this movie so much. At number 2, I have The Evil Dead, Sam Raimi's original film from 1981. This is the first of Sam Raimi's horror movies I watched, and his filmmaking in this movie has made me so excited to watch the rest of his horror movies. His camera work in bringing you into these wonderfully creepy environments in this cabin in the woods, the techniques he uses make this so engrossing. I love the long shots he uses showing the point of view of the evil dead in the woods stalking and coming after the characters inside. You always feel like the woods are closing in on the characters. You feel this evil all over these woods and this cabin. The design of everything with the cabin and how worn down it is makes it terrifying. The cinematography and lighting are gorgeous, and the darkness of the woods creates such a haunting atmosphere. I love the little details like the bench creaking against the house, the behind shot of the car driving in. You get the sense things are very wrong here even before the dead is actually unleashed. You feel the presence. And as for the wackiness, this movie doesn't go as far as the next two films will, but it certainly has its moments. The chainsaw and axe kills, the excessive amounts of blood, the deadites have so much personality and are so creepy. Even though Ash isn't as wacky here, Bruce Campbell still brings so much energy and personality to the character. This movie has the best horror elements of the trilogy for me. It's where the Evil Dead feels its most suffocating and scary. The vine scene is so haunting but so well done, and the effects there are great. Some of the effects definitely don't look very good today, and I would say that across this whole trilogy, but Raimi makes this movie so energetic and colorful. It's such a great balance of horror and comedy. My favorite Evil Dead movie is Evil Dead 2. This movie started off very strange for me. The first movie is quite wacky, but this movie starts off and throws Ash back into the cabin, and things just get insane. You see how Ash's experience in the first movie and confronting the Evil Dead has drove him just a little bit mad, and with that you get a higher amount of insane horror comedy that is a big jump from the first movie. I honestly didn't know if I cared for it at first. I was thinking, is this too much for me? Is this too silly? But I also loved and appreciated how much of Sam Raimi's personal style was here, and how he was able to go further into it here. And then as it goes along, I loved the camera work, the comedic horror moments. You get a little more of the lore with the professor characters, and you get a more wild version of Ash that is even more enjoyable to watch this time around. I ended up loving this movie. The horror isn't as strong, there's nothing like the vine scene in terms of pure terror, but the balance of the horror with the even stronger amount of comedy makes this movie even more entertaining than the first. The finale with Ash, with the robot arm, the shotgun, the chainsaw, it's so cool. The effects are definitely rough in the finale at certain points, but this is such a sincere and personal movie with so much fun and personality, and Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi outdid themselves. It's awesome. I'll be right back on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale, but first here's some more movie music, starting with March of the Dead by Joseph Loduca from the Army of Darkness score. Welcome back to Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. Closing out the show today, I'm going to give you my 3 throwback recommendations for this week. Every week, I like to take 3 movies I like to recommend and give a little review/recommendation on them here. My first throwback recommendation for this week is Nobody.
I used to be what they call an auditor. The last guy anyone wants to see at their door. Because it meant you didn't have long to live. But I left it behind to start a family. Hey! I might have overcorrected.
Directed by Ilya Naishuller, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, a docile family man played by Bob Odenkirk slowly reveals his true character after his house gets burgled by 2 petty thieves, which coincidentally leads him into a bloody war with a Russian crime boss. I love this movie so much. I love the John Wick franchise, and Bob Odenkirk doing one of these action movie roles where he re-enters the criminal underworld he retired a legend in is so cool to see. Odenkirk is jacked here. He pulls off the action so well. He brings an intensity and intimidation to his character as well as being the normal family man. You believe both. Odenkirk has a very normal vibe to him that you wouldn't necessarily be intimidated by him, but once he starts getting into action, you do not want to mess with this guy. There's so much awesome action in this movie. The hand-to-hand fights are gritty and brutal, but work in some comedy as well. Connie Nielsen as his wife and the family dynamic there works really well also, and it's a very strange family drama that works well in the story. This movie is pretty silly at times, but it balances the brutality and comedy well. Christopher Lloyd is awesome here. This movie has a lot of cool stuff you don't expect. There's also a bit of that cool underworld world building that's a bit like John Wick. It's not as in-depth as John Wick's world, but it adds some personality to this world that makes it engaging. This movie is such an awesome addition to the action genre. It has the awesome action and a number of memorable fights, a strange but effective family drama, and a perfect mix of violence and comedy. A sequel to this film also came out last year. It's not as good as the first film, but it's still really fun and has some awesome action. I would recommend both of them, but this first movie is so rewatchable for me. It's a pretty short runtime, but it uses every second of it tremendously. If you like the John Wick movies, I think you'll like this one as well. My second throwback recommendation for this week is The Town.
There are over 300 bank robberies in Boston every year. Most of these professionals live in a 1 square mile neighborhood called Charlestown.
Directed by Ben Affleck, a proficient group of thieves rob a bank and hold the manager hostage. Things begin to get complicated when one of the crew members, played by Ben Affleck, falls in love with her. This is a really awesome robbery thriller movie. It has some really intense heist sequences. There's bank robberies with a pulsing intensity and chaos of a group of armed robbers taking over the place. There's great armored car heists and shootouts. Every time the action breaks out, it's unrelenting and you feel the chaos of everything going on. The cast here is really stacked. Ben Affleck and Jeremy Renner play the main members of this crew. Rebecca Hall is great here as the bank manager that finds herself in the middle of this mess with Ben Affleck. You have John Hamm as the FBI agent tracking them down. It becomes this great cat and mouse story. These guys pulling these jobs, you have some tension within this crew and this romance story, and it gets more and more intense and thrilling as it goes along. The final heist is awesome. You have great planning stuff and the thrills there. This is also a very Boston set movie. You have some development of the town and this community of robbers. With the Boston setting, that aspect of it ties into the final heist in a really cool way. It makes it so unique, and the setting gives the movie a lot of character. Even just characters and dialogue talking about the Red Sox at different times really brings this setting to life so authentically. Ben Affleck's directed films are really great, and this one has so much intensity, a thrilling cat and mouse story with different sources of danger, and a stacked cast. My third throwback recommendation for this week is Edge of Tomorrow.
I'm not a soldier.
Of course you're not. You're a weapon.
Directed by Doug Liman, a man fighting in a war against aliens, played by Tom Cruise, must relive the same day every time he dies until he can find a way to stop their power source with the help of an elite soldier played by Emily Blunt. Like Nobody, this movie is so rewatchable for me. It is such a fun ride of a sci-fi movie. It's so many great sci-fi elements in one movie. There's an alien invasion plot, Tom Cruise and Emily Blunt are in mech suits, and the big element of this movie is the time loop plot. The way the script ties all these elements together is so clever. It's dealing with a lot in one movie, but it never feels unfocused or too much. The movie has great world building, and the world brings all these elements together seamlessly. I love a good time loop plot, and this movie does it so well. You have the confusion of the character figuring out their situation, and then making progress in their mission, getting farther each time. This movie has a lot of fun with it. There's some funny moments with it that add a light tone, and the story has a really interesting objective that adds a really smart purpose to the time loop element. The way Emily Blunt's character fits into the story and her relationship with Tom Cruise's character is really interesting. The dynamics with the characters is really fascinating with how the time loop element works, and the two have great chemistry. Emily Blunt is playing the tough soldier character here and is really awesome, and Tom Cruise plays the less experienced character that is new to action. It's fun to see him in this different kind of role, and Cruise plays the manic confusion so well, and the mech suits with the alien battles are cool too. The effects and warfare of these sequences is really exciting. The main draw is the time loop plot and the developments there, but the action also ties in seamlessly and has moments to shine. Edge of Tomorrow is a blast of a sci-fi movie that I love rewatching. The two leads are awesome, and if you like time loop movies, cool alien action, this movie has a lot of great stuff in all of that. So this week, if you want a Bob Odenkirk-led action movie with awesome fights and a bit of humor, watch Nobody. If you want a tense heist crime movie, watch The Town. And if you want a fun time loop sci-fi movie, watch Edge of Tomorrow. I'll be right back to close out the show, but first here's some more movie music, starting with Winning the War by Christopher Beck from the Edge of Tomorrow score. That's going to be it for me this week on Not Quite My Tempo with Chris on WFNP Rosendale. I'll be back next week with a review of The Strangers Chapter 3 and some more movie talk. You can listen to past episodes of the show on YouTube, and be sure to follow my Instagram for updates and more content. Both of those are Not Quite My Tempo with Chris. New episodes will be up on my YouTube after they air on WFNP Rosendale, so this episode will be up very shortly, and I will be back next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Have a good week.